So Corrinke Boon is a Dutch storyteller and poet based in Ericeira, Portugal. In summer 2024, she co-founded Storytelling Ericeira, a live storytelling event where people volunteer to get on stage and tell often revealing stories to dozens of strangers. In 2022, she published a book of poems called Between Dark and Dawn. And thanks very much for being with us, Corrinke.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
So, Corrinke, for those who don't know, can you describe for us how a live storytelling event works?
Yes, I can. Um, there's many of these events, and they all work a little bit differently. But ours works as follows: we host it every month. We have a theme for the night, and it can be anything. So we've had it this week, and the theme was unspoken. Last time it was should have lied. It's different kind of themes that are very open, and then people can sign up to tell a story that is creatively related to the topic. Um, and then people tell stories. And the most important part is it's actual stories. So it's not inspirational speeches or TED Talks or anything like that. And a story means that it's actually something that happens. It's not like using it as a theme where you're like, oh, what are all the things that are unspoken in my life? No, you're actually taking a moment where something was unspoken. And that's what you tell your story around. And that's basically it. It's a night where like roughly we have 8 to 10 storytellers and people show up to listen to it. It's a very simple concept with, well, you've been there, big impact.
I mean, yeah, you're getting now what's sometimes between 100 and 200 people turning up to these events in quite a busy cultural calendar. So, what do you think is the big draw for audiences?
I really don't like using this word, but it's very wholesome. You don't have, anyone can come. You don't have to do anything for it. You can just like show up, you can listen, hang out with your friends. But I think more importantly, we're all craving a sense of belonging. We live in a very individualistic world, and this belonging is kind of like automatically created, which is funny. And this is kind of like one of the things I really like to talk about. But there is a neurological thing happening in your brain between storytellers and listeners. I don't know if you know about this.
No, I don't.
Basically, when someone tells a story and you use like storytelling techniques, so it's like an actual story, you use like silences and sound and like a lot of body language. What then happens is that the person who listens to you, their brain waves automatically synchronize with yours. So you make like an automatic connection. This is researched. So you're basically on the same wavelength. And so you make an automatic connection between each other. And it's very interesting to see that actually happening in front of your eyes at an event like this. And that's from an audience perspective, right? Then we also have a lot of people that want to tell stories. Um, what is interesting there, and obviously I can only speak for myself and what I've heard from people, is it's not only about telling your story. It's for some people like public speaking and the fear of it and overcoming it. It's There's a thing where when you prepare your story, and it really doesn't matter if it's like a funny story or like a more intimate or emotional story. In the phase of preparation, you're really allowing yourself to see that part of yourself that plays a role in this story. And then in doing that, you also create a sense of belonging to yourself. And then in telling the story on a stage, that is actually where you then also like show that part of yourself to others and create that sense of belongings between yourself and others, which is amazing. But I believe that in the earlier stages, creating all of that for yourself, that is where a lot of magic happens. Um,
So, you're saying in a way, when crafting and preparing the story, the first person you tell it to is yourself. And that kind of creates somehow a nurturing relationship between the different aspects of the self, like the way like a mother and her child. Because mothers, because that's what, probably the first time we're told stories, right? Is in the crib when your mom is telling you stories as she puts you to bed, right?
Exactly. And I mean, we all know this. It's as old as like humans are to tell each other stories. That's just like how we connect, how we like exchange knowledge and visions and everything. Um, yeah, it is actually a very nurturing thing. And yeah, and you first show it to yourself. And then, for example, what happens for me sometimes I prepare a story and I'm like, I can do a lot of like analysis and stuff like that myself. And then in preparing it, I'm all of a sudden like, oh, whoa, I actually never really realized that. Or like I find a new angle. But it also has happened that sometimes I had a story and I was like, something just isn't right about it. And I would like tell it to a friend and they would say, oh my God, did you see, for example, which role your mom actually played in that? And then I didn't realize. And that can sometimes change the entire story. So it's basically just therapy. That's what it is.
I love it. So, what was your first encounter with this storytelling format? Because probably a lot of people have never even really heard of these sorts of events.
I think my first actual encounter was Storytelling Lisboa. So the same kind of event in Lisbon, years ago. Yeah, I would say it's 4 years ago now. A friend of mine was friends with the organizer and she was like, you should tell a story here. And she actually signed me up for it. I was like, okay, apparently I'm going to do this. I had never been. I just showed up, went on stage, and I was like, wow, this is terrifying. I will never do this again. And, but especially the interaction, like seeing other people tell their stories and seeing that it really doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't matter that much. It's such an incredible thing to see people express themselves and see work through their emotions and what is alive in them and to see the world through their eyes for 8 to 10 minutes. That broadens my perspective. And that was actually what attracted me in it. And then afterwards, hang out with them, have a chat on like, hey, this is what resonated with me. Thank you for sharing that. And then, like, because we all hear something else in it, right? Someone can tell a story and something resonates for me. And that doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but this is how things, yeah, how we connect over it.
And why do you think it matters that the story is true?
I think it matters because it does create that sense of belonging. It matters for me personally, I think, in a way. One of my missions in life, sounds big, is to normalize things, normalize in a sense that we can talk about anything. It's because everything we experience is just part of being human. And unless we deliberately hurt someone, I think everything we experience is normal, whatever that is. And we think we're so unique and special. And then when you tell a story and you're like, wow, this is so me and I'm super nervous. And now all these people notice about me. And then afterwards you hear these people saying, oh yeah, I had that too. Or like, oh, you actually put words to something that I have felt, but never really realized. And I think to create that sense of connection and belonging, it has to be real. I think there's a lot of value in made up stories, fictional stories. I think it just has a different purpose. So it's very like similar to actual life. If you can sense that a person is not genuine towards you, it's really hard to build that connection because it builds like, can I then be genuine towards you? Like it doesn't feel safe anymore. And I think in storytelling, it's the same thing. For me, it's always, I can sometimes tell stories that also like people are like, you really telling this story? And I have the same feeling. Um, but in setting myself free, in opening up about my experiences in certain areas, I also set other people free to talk about the same thing, which might not be the same experience, but like, hey, all experiences are okay. You can be honest here. And it sounds maybe very big and dramatic, and it's not, but it's just truth. I think it's important.
The first story that you told at that first event in Lisbon, do you remember what
Mm.
it was about?
In Lisbon,
Yeah, the first ever one
yeah,
you told, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was not a great story because I had no idea of the sense of storytelling, so I made it a theme. The theme was authority, um, and the story was about how I always looked for authority outside myself instead of inside myself. Um, so in the way how I grew up, so I looked for authority and love in my dad. After that, other people around me. Um, and with an ending of, cool that you bring this up, with an ending of, I cannot say I love myself in this moment, but I know one day it will come and then I will have that authority inside myself.
It's impressive that you remember that so clearly, such a, clear memory of the ending 4 years later. Is
It
that
was November this month 4 years ago. That's very funny. I think stories, because you spend time like really diving in on what is actually alive. What, for me, it's important. I don't just tell stories. I mean, I can, but I really dive into my body of what wants to be told. And that asks a lot of time and preparation, and not in a sense of like writing the story preparation, but like preparation in the sense of feeling into what my body wants to express. And in that sense, then yeah, I do remember my stories, maybe not in the detail, but I definitely remember what kind of story I told.
so for you? It's a very embodied practice,
Yes. Yeah.
and compared to 4 years ago and now, you've told a lot of stories since then. You've helped a lot of other people prepare their stories, and you've hosted a lot of storytelling events. What has changed for you in terms of how you prepare the stories that you yourself tell?
Um, I trust a lot more in the process. Before, because my process is more or less as follows. There is a theme. I'm like, I will always prepare. So I'm like, okay, there's a theme. I'll prepare a story because if we have too many cancellations, I know I will have to have a story. And I just put it like the name in my notes app. And then during the first week, I'll be, every time something pops up, I'm like, oh, I can go in that direction or in that direction. I'll write it down. Then I go into what kind of feelings and emotions come up when I think about this theme. So if we're talking about unspoken, what kind of emotions does that simple word bring up in me? Because then I know I go into like the more expansive state of storytelling, and I will automatically go to the story that wants to be told. And then a week before, or like before, like 4 days before, I stop. I don't do anything. I don't have a story yet. I just let it like kind of like linger around. I on purpose don't think about it. And then generally, like a day before, there will be a story popping up. And that's the moment I'm like, okay, apparently that's the story. Let me start working on it and see what is there. And then the moment my stomach kind of turns and I get nervous, and I'm like, okay, then that is the story that wants to be told. Um, and yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
So, what is the experience of actually telling the story on stage like for you?
It's it's different depending on the story. I think, and this is, I didn't fully answer your previous question. I think I got a lot more relaxed in telling stories. And I now challenge myself every time in like, what do I want to try? What do I want to test? So at the moment, it's a lot in staying in the moment, in body language, in pausing way longer, which is super scary for me. Because if you see all these eyes on you and you're just not saying anything, oh, that's terrifying. But especially that for me also makes me embody the story more. So that's at the moment my challenge. Um, But then depending on the story and how complicated I made it for myself, I can be nervous. I think the last time you were there, the story I told, I was very nervous for. I knew the moment that the story dropped in, like my stomach was like, I don't know, I felt like I'm gonna get sick. I was like, I cannot believe that I want to tell this story. So I was very nervous, but the moment I'm on the stage and I grab the mic, I I deliberately take a breath and I try to feel into the crowd actually looking at me and that part of me that really wants to be seen, that I want to show people. And then I get super calm and then I tell the story. And I noticed lately the last two stories I told were very simple, like very simple moments. The structure of the story was very simple. The story I told this week, I didn't prepare. I knew 5 minutes beforehand that I was going to tell a story. Um, and that's really fun because what it does is you really don't have to think about, am I going to remember the story? Because it's so simple and you can spend a lot more time on the pauses, the body language, and like really feeling on what's happening in the room instead of when you tell a very constructed, well-structured story. Um, but yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we feel this sense of anxiety when we go on. I don't know, because you told a story as well. I don't know how that felt for you, but I have this feeling of anxiety. But then anxiety and excitement are such similar experiences in your body. I mean, they both make your heart race. They both like feel like a bit, for me at least, feel like fire inside. And like I'm getting warm, I'm getting a little bit sweaty. They're very similar. And also to like approach them like that, makes it, makes it a really interesting. Like for me, it means that I'm actually doing something that's important to me.
Yeah, similar. I would say I experienced anxiety in the like 1 hour before going on stage, but it wasn't, you know, stage fright or fear of public speaking. It was more like I've got to get this right. It was like it
Mm,
was like the anxiety that makes you focus and makes you want to, you know, be on top of your game. And then the actual telling of the story when on stage was fine. It was like kind of fun and relaxing.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, that 1 hour before was intense. Like people were trying to talk to me, and I was just like, I just couldn't, you
I
know.
know that feeling. And isn't it also like the story you told was a very personal and important story?
Yeah,
Um, so you want to
yeah,
honor, you kind of want to honor the story.
yeah.
Um,
But when you don't prepare, do you find that you're more in flow state when you're actually telling the story?
I'm more present. I can
Yeah,
remember more specific moments after. If I am very nervous for a story and it's the structure is a bit more complicated because I wanted to like do some like flashbacks and whatever. Sometimes I get off the stage and I'm like, wow, what even happened there? Did I tell everything I wanted to tell? Did I forget things? I have no clue. And that's actually, I don't like that. I really want to be present, um, in the story that I'm telling. So yeah, when I prepare less, I am more present because I can, in the moment, I'll think about like, what is the next thing I'm going to tell because I didn't rehearse. I didn't like, I know where I start. I know like what my arc is and where I want to end. And that's about it. And I think this is like something I'm getting out of at the moment. But since I also write poetry, words are very important for me. So when I prepare a story and I have these like sentences that I want to say specifically in that way because they sound so good. And that's basically fucking yourself over because that's not great if you need to remember that for the stage. So that's what I'm getting myself out of.
do you ever watch back? Because I know you guys record the stories. Do you ever watch back the stories that you tell? Okay.
do share it with some people. Sometimes I don't. I just a while ago did a recording for Storytelling Lisboa for their podcast, and I had to watch my own story back. And I was like, wow, they want this on the podcast. It's not that great. I should have done this differently and that differently. And why am I having my eyes closed all the time? That doesn't make any sense. My eyes are open. I saw things. And again, it's for me, if I will never tell stories again, it's not a big thing. I really love the preparation part, and I do love, because I do release it on stage. Like it's then it's gone. It's out there, and I like that part. But it's not the most important part. That's less of the art for me than everything around it.
I was going to ask you about that because it feels like the hosting of is that what you mean? The hosting of the event by everything
And
around
telling
it?
the story.
Yeah. Because that, how do you kind of manage that relationship of the artistry of hosting the event versus telling a story versus supporting the other storytellers? Is that all part of the same basket for you?
It's different. What I love most about it is seeing what happens in the room at storytelling, and the hosting part, because I can guide that. So lately I've been sharing more on why storytelling events are important for me, why we started it, why we
To
spend
the
so
au-
much time.
You mean to the audience while you're
Yes,
there? Yeah.
yes. So on stage, and also motivate people to, like, hey, if you hear something in someone's story that resonates with you, or that you admire, tell them. Like, make that connection. Don't be shy. This is an important part. And I really love having that role, and also supporting people just before they go up because they're nervous, and be like, hey, you're good. It's okay to be nervous. That's very normal. And to guide that little process. Preparing the stories with people, that's what I love to do most. That's just to help them go a little bit deeper. Or even, like, a lot of people say, like, I have 0 stories. I have nothing. And obviously that's not true. We all have stories. We just don't see them as stories. But because, like, you really need to shift your view on your life and moments, and because sometimes the best stories are like 5-second moments. It's really not that special. And we're often looking for these, like, really big moments, and we're like, I don't have those. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But we still all have stories that are fun, that are impactful, that have meaning, etc. And to guide people through that process and guide them into their body on, like, hey, you're saying that word. Why do you say that word? Like, what do you feel when you express it like that? Do you remember if you felt the same thing in the moment when it happened? And at some point, the story starts, like, shifting into, like, the story that's, well, as I say, wants to be told. And then all of a sudden you see, like, the light go on, and people are like, oh my God, I never saw it like this. And then they get super excited to, like, work on the story and to tell it. And that's what I like to do most. And
So
then
do
telling
you
us, yeah.
go on? Sorry. Yeah. Please.
No.
Well, no, I wanted to ask, do you now prepare all the storytellers? Because when I told a story at the first event last summer, you didn't work with me to prepare it. So I'm curious, is that something that now happens regularly?
Yes. It does happen a lot. I offer people, when they sign up, like, hey, if you want help, let me know. But then also tell me what help you need, because that's obviously very different. A lot of people also know me, so they will just send me a message like, hey, I might have a story. Can you help? And so obviously I don't prepare all the stories with people. and the support needed really differs. Some people are like, hey, this is the story, I recorded it, can you just listen to it and give me some pointers? Other people are like, I want to tell a story, but I don't have anything, could you help me? So it's a range of things. And there's people that go on and really don't need any of my support, which is also great. So yeah, that's kind of like the differences. Yeah.
And you were going to tell us about the difference between supporting and hosting and telling the story
Yes.
in terms of the creative act of it.
Yeah. Hosting for me is very outward focused, is very much like about the other people and about creating a community. Supporting a story is also very outward focused, obviously, but is at the same time as much for me as it is for them, because it teaches me to really trust. I don't work with models. When people are saying like, how do you build a story? I'm like, I don't know. It's different every time. Um, and it teaches me to really trust on my intuition on like where people want to go. And also gives me insights in my own practice in that. And telling a story that is twofold, I would say. Obviously, it's for myself. It's a way of expressing what is alive in me, and that's where the art form also comes in place. That I want to get better to help myself get better at expressing what is actually alive instead of using words that are nice. It doesn't really matter. It's about being able to transform what is inside to come outside in a way that people can understand. Whether they understand it in the same way as I do or not, that doesn't really matter. But in this case, words and body language, that they grasp an understanding of what is alive in me. And at storytelling, I've told a lot of stories that are also in a way outward focused because I want to show people that you can literally talk about anything. So that's coming back to like the normalizations of every part of our human existence. We can say that on like, yeah, you can talk about anything. Like it's great. It's a safe space as far as those actually exist. But I always felt that, okay, then I need to also make that example. That's at the moment is less the case because I think we have created that. And I can notice myself going more towards like softer stories and simpler stories, which has been happening recently, which is interesting.
So can you articulate which stories work and which ones maybe fall flat?
Hmm. Well, one thing is important for me, and I can see the crowd respond to it, is stories where people at the end like turn it into into a TED talk after all. With that I mean like, so the lesson of my story is that you should always do this and never do that, and I have these 3 points. I understand like an ending of a story is very complicated, but it's such a the inspiration is in the story. We already got your point, of course, because we heard your story, and in doing it again, that makes it fall flat. Stories that also don't really work are stories where we want to tell so many things. We think everything is important. The simpler the story, the easier it lands. Because if I am just trying to keep up with where you are going with your story, it's really hard for me to actually like make something happen inside me to make that connection, because I'm just like kind of like chasing you, or like you're running and I'm trying to keep up. Stories need to be told from the scar and not from the wound. If you're telling it from the wound, that's up to you. But it's then kind of trauma dumpy most of the time. And not on purpose, but really like you're kind of not ready to share this story because you're still processing it. And you can know that because it becomes heavy. And then the crowd doesn't really know what to do with it. I don't really know what to do with it. And also because it's almost like a scream for help. And this is what I tell people when they're like, should I tell this story? If you need anything from the people you tell the story to, you're not in the right spot. As soon as you're like, I tell this story for myself, if you like it, if you don't, if you get something out of it, great. If you don't, that is fine. But I don't need anything from you. I don't need your support. I don't need hugs, basically. Then you're in the right spot. But anything before that, you need to wait. And maybe it comes, maybe it never comes. I have stories that I really want to tell, but I know I need people to come to me afterwards and hug me and be like, okay, should we talk about this or whatever? And like, maybe I will never tell them, and that's okay. Then therefore other moments, friends, whatever. But that's a very important part.
I love those. I feel like I need those on print out on my wall because I think they also apply to memoir writing and to writing in general. Super useful. Is that also related to authenticity in the sense that, often in story structure, we're taught stories need to resolve, but in real life, it feels like things often don't resolve. They're just left hanging there and forgotten about, or we move on, or they resolve in a way that we don't necessarily process or desire.
Yeah. There was this girl who told a story, and it's one of my most memorable stories that I heard. I don't know if you were there. It was in Ericeira, and she told a story about that she was celibate for the last, I would say, 5 years. And in the beginning it was on purpose, but now it was not on purpose anymore. And the story was about like how she reached out to a guy, and then things happened. And then in the end, she ended with like, not like, oh, and now I found someone, because that would be the easy one, right? Because like, yeah, and then I learned so much from it, and like, yeah, it was hard, but now I'm good. No, she ended with like, and I'm still there. And I think that makes stories relatable, because otherwise it's always this like, I can only share about things afterwards. I can only share from like the lesson. But maybe the lesson is staying in what is actually true and what makes us human, so we can connect over that instead of like, but now I'm really cool.
How do you choose the themes for the evening? Like, do you have a guiding principle?
Little bits. I literally get inspiration out of conversations with people. So I literally, like last night I was meeting with friends in Lisbon, and some people like mentioned some things. And I was like, okay, I need to write this down. I ask people for topics. I always ask that storytelling as well. Like, guys, we don't have a theme for next month. Come with ideas. It's hard sometimes, because I also notice that I like to go to like the dark side of things, and I want to have a balance. So we also have lighter topics or topics that are just neutral and people can go in any direction. And at some point we'll just have a list. And what we then do is we just see what resonates, what kind of directions people can go in. And because we live in Ericeira, make sure that it's not a topic that will just get us like very spiritual stories, because we need to have a balance. So I think that's the most important thing. I think a lot of topics are good, but we need topics that people can go funny, more emotional, and also in the spiritual direction, because I think it's important, because it's a part of life, but also in the non-spiritual direction. So that's kind of like the balance that we always try to find. And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we really don't, which some topics we're like, this is amazing. And then it's too big. So I think we always think when like the sky is the limit, that is amazing, right? But actually our human brain really needs boundaries, because within that we can actually think. Because if anything is possible, we're like, too many options, I don't know. So the wider topics we tend to get less signups for than when it's more compact, more defined. Yeah, I think that's basically it.
I'm reading a memoir at the moment by Michael Ondaatje. It's like a family memoir about the generations that preceded his.
Hmm.
And there's an acknowledgement at the end of the book where he says um, something along the lines of, essentially, I've had to make up a lot of this. I've taken what I've been told by my family members and I've, uh, constructed something out of it. And then he says, a well told lie is worth 1,000 facts. In the context of storytelling, how much editing is acceptable in a true story?
This is a hard one. Also for myself, I think. So stories are always perceptions of facts, right? Like, I told a story last month about a moment in my life when I was 5, and it was like all my sisters were there. They will definitely not tell the same story because their lived experience was very different. And I don't know every exact emotion or fact or whatever happened. So yeah, I play a little bit with that, but that is to go back to that moment and I try to feel into it. If you make up facts to make your story so much better, I think you're in the wrong spot. I think that's for me the distinction. Because your story is good in itself. And otherwise, this is, again, probably not the story that wants to be told. This is a story that your brain wants to tell. But if you go into your body to the story that wants to be told, you probably just have to dig deeper. And that's the thing. But again, also, and that's not for everyone, and that's fine. If you want to tell a funny story on stage, great. If you want to, like, go to the story that wants to be told and make it, as you said, like an embodied experience, and which is what I like to do, it's work. It's not going to be done in 5 minutes. But I truly believe that if you dig deep, your story is good. You really don't have to make up things to make it better. You will probably play with it a little bit because you don't remember everything exactly as it happened if it's a longer time ago, or obviously change names, those kind of things. But that's not what we're talking about here. But for me, that would be the difference.
Do you ever think about taking the stories that you tell
Mm-hmm.
and turning them into a book, or taking a selection of the stories that have been told throughout the events and turning those into a book or into, an audio compilation?
Yes, is the very short answer. Yes, I do. I have lately, I think this happened like 2 months ago, I have all my own recordings and put them on YouTube. You cannot see them, they're private. Because I know that one day something is going to happen with it. I don't know what it is, but it's important to store them. I think a book is tough because a told story is very different from a written story. It's a very different technique, especially people that write and want to tell a story. They come to me and they're like, I'm lost. I don't know how to do this because I cannot have a conversation on stage. And that makes sense, right? As a writer, you recognize this probably. What I do, again, I think for me, storytelling is not about the stories itself. Like, yeah, of course, but for me, the storytelling event is way more about the gathering and the listening and the holding space and the expressing yourself and all of that. And my motto of what happens at storytelling stays at storytelling is very much alive, but I do I have been thinking about it lately on, is there anything else I would want to do with it? Like Lisbon has a podcast where they like their favorite stories, they put in a podcast and they talk about it. Um, I could see something happening, not a podcast, I would say, but something. I don't know what it is, and I believe it will pop up. Also because I love that you asked this question, mainly because in the last, also again, like 2 months or so, there's been people. I tell lots of stories about my childhood and upbringing and like how that's turned me into the person I am and the relationship with my parents and all of that. And a friend told me the other day, she's like, I can really see you release it on stage. It's so tangible. I can almost pick it up from the floor and put it in my pocket and like take it with me, which is true. I know that's true. And more people have been telling me, like, you're a writer. Why don't you write this entire story? And like, you can start by bundling all these stories. So I know that there's something there and it has been intriguing me. I just don't know the form yet. If it's going to be stories or a full on written one, or I don't know. But thank you for asking me this because I see it as an invitation and there's definitely something going to happen. Something fun.
Or it could be a spoken word performance, like
Yeah.
a long form storytelling, just Corrinke.
Yeah. Oh, that could be really cool, actually.
I
Now
would
you're
go,
saying this, I was also like, or maybe just like, I just start telling stories online. It doesn't have to be at events. Interesting. Interesting. I like it.
do you ever worry about the emotional safety of the storytellers?
Can you elaborate on that?
Has there ever been a situation where you felt, you know, a storyteller is telling a story that is mm, overwhelming for them, or they've become too emotional, or they're struggling?
I have felt that in events that I didn't organize. I maybe felt it once in Ericeira, but I talk to the storytellers afterwards. And this wasn't the case after the first event, I think, maybe. I don't remember. But I do aftercare the day after. So I check in with all the storytellers. I like tell them what I really liked about their story. Um, and if there's anything that we should connect over, that we can connect. Um, I haven't It's an interesting one. I haven't specifically checked in on that, but that's actually really interesting. I didn't have the feeling it was necessary though.
Have you ever had anybody blank? Like, because I remember once I organized a different type of storytelling event,
Mm-hmm.
which was asking people to tell made up stories, improvise made up stories. And one person blanked, and it was quite painful. Um,
Mm,
because there was maybe 20 of yeah, probably almost 30 of us there, and to have this person really try for several minutes, he couldn't even really get the story launched, and we were just encouraging him, and then at a certain point he just said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this."
yeah,
And it was, yeah, it was a very raw moment.
that is, and that's interesting because I think that's partly the difference between a fictional story and a non-fictional story. Because a non-fictional story you can always go back to because you know what happened. Plus, I think when people blank, what happens is they go to their brain, and in their brain they panic, and the story actually is alive in their body. So the main thing is help people to go back from their brain to like their body. So it's just take a couple deep breaths. So I have seen it happen, not in Ericeira, but in Lisbon. And the host there is very good at this. So he would like, calm down, we're going to take a couple breaths and you'll be back to it. The crowd is super supportive. So the crowd is just applauding until the person is like back to the story. And I've never seen the blackout stay. So it's always, people would always like get back to the story. And especially those people get a lot of attention afterwards by the crowd. People always come up to them on like, you were so brave. That was so impressive. And I think that's the beauty of the storytelling events. It's not about the stories. It's again about the community. So the community also picks up these kind of things. And that's also showing a part of you that you might not want to show, but it's very human. And it's, I don't know how you experience that, but the audience is so supportive. People are super quiet. They're really there to listen. And also to like give a hug afterwards and have a chat and do all these things.
It's a very caring environment, I agree. It's almost like, it's not so much performance is rewarded, but, honesty and vulnerability, and
Yeah.
certainly I remember that instance that I'm talking about. I remember thinking, although he didn't actually tell a story, it was the most beautiful story of that night,
Yeah.
because I don't know, it was just very emotional to see him trying for good 2 or 3 minutes
Yeah.
and being
And
unable to
those
find
are
the
the
words.
stories that stay with you, no? Like it's
Yeah,
not the best performances. It's
yeah.
not the stories that were like super polished. It's the stories that maybe structure wise, whatever. There was a girl telling a story also in Ericeira. Her story was really not the best story, but it was about the country she was born in and where there's war, and I could like everyone could like really feel the emotions. Her English wasn't perfect. That only like adds to that. I am crying. And like even now I'm getting emotional again because it was so real, it was so vulnerable, it was so raw. That's for me, that's what I want. And don't get me wrong, again, I really enjoy good stories, perfectly performed, awesome. I love it. But in the end, that's not the stories that stay with me. That's not the biggest connection I make. Then I'm just having an appreciation on how good someone is. But the appreciation for the human itself, that comes from like the realness, the rawness, and like sharing their emotions with me, sharing what is alive in them.
Does the storytelling night influence your poetry? Has the whole process of engaging with this form influenced the other form which you were doing prior to that?
I want to say no. I think the influence is bigger. I think I do see a trend in what I'm going through in life that all of a sudden both my poetry and my stories are about that without me even realizing it. I can only see that in hindsight. Um, but if the storytelling influences it, well, in a sense, yes, because sometimes people mention something, or like I have a sentence in my story, and will write it down as a note on like I might one day write about this as in poetry. Um, and it has influenced in a way that now I also write longer things on Substack. And before I didn't do that. So that's like kind of like an in between. It's like not a storytelling kind of thing because it's written. It's more like, hey, this is what's alive. It's more a theme. Um, but yeah, there's probably more overlap. But I think it's mainly my subconscious that influences everything without me even noticing, which is very fun.
And has running the event and regularly telling stories changed how you think about your own life and memories?
Yes, 100%. Both in like the past and the present. Um, I noticed that I really look at it with a different eye. I'm way more aware of details. I'm way more aware of little moments. I also, when I'm sometimes want to do dumb shit, I tell myself I should do this because at least I'll get a good story out of it. So I'm like justifying doing really dumb things. Um, and in the past, the storytelling, like for example, what I also said about the subconscious, all of a sudden, like a month ago, I was telling a story that I never expected to tell. And I was like, is this even a story? It was about like me as a 5-year-old. Very simple, but very intense. And it really stayed with me. And then I noticed that, and I didn't realize, I only realized it like 2 weeks ago, that I was like, oh, wow, that was definitely my subconscious bringing up things that I'm working on at the moment, which is like fear in my nervous system. Um, that this story came back up because I was fully about that. And it's the same in my writing. Um, and all of a sudden it all made sense. But in the moment I did it, I was like, this is just a story. And I did get really sad about it. And I know I cried a lot after on like, wow, that was really something. And on the poetry, I was writing poetry about this and I got lost. I didn't know what it meant. I was like, I don't know what I'm writing. I don't know what this means. And I'm stuck and I just left it. And then later, all of a sudden, everything came together and I was like, wow. And I think that is really this, you make art from your body, from a very embodied space, from your subconscious and not from your brain. Because your brain tries to make sense of everything. And of course, you need your brain to like make the translation. But in the end, for me at least, it comes from inside. It comes from within my body.
Fantastic. So, Corrinke, thank you so much for talking to us today. And we'll drop links in the show notes to Storytelling Ericeira and to your Instagram where people can follow along and find out about the next events. It's once a month in Ericeira. And yeah, we, yeah, really happy to have you on the podcast. And thanks so much again.
Thank you. It was such a good spending my morning. Thank you. This was fun.